Today we're going to be getting into 3 different expressions from 1792, one of which won the 2020 Whiskey of the Year award from Jim Murray. Hello everybody and welcome to the Whiskey Dictionary. I know that I don't often do 3 separate bottles or multiple bottles either way, but this is all the same whiskey, just bottled in different ways. So I thought it made some sense to cover them all. So let's talk about 1792. Now 1792 is the year that Kentucky became a state in the US. So it's not that the distillery's been around since the 1700s. In fact, it opened in 1879. However, that does make it the oldest distillery in Bardstown, Kentucky, which is something. So it was originally sold as Ridgewood Reserve until Brown-Forman, the owners of Woodford Reserve, ended up suing them, saying that people would get confused by the name. Now, but whatever, you gotta make headlines somehow. So this whiskey is 74% corn, 18% rye, 8% barley, and it's got a char of 3.5. And these are all bottled at a different proof. This is, this is 46.85%. This is 100 proof, so 50%. And this is 125 proof, which is 62.5, because I can't do math. All right, so let's talk about the way that these things differ. Now, if we go into the nosing and tasting, this is the small batch. And the small batch, as I said, is the lowest of the ABV between the 3 of them. Now, that being said, it's still 46.85%, which means that they cared enough not to make it 40%, which, love it. So let's go ahead and give this a nose. And it's got a good one. There is a little bit, what's interesting? You know how oftentimes if you have a higher ABV, you'll get a burn. But sometimes, especially in bourbon I've found, if something has a higher ABV, but they balance it properly, you don't get the burn, but there's just this, it's like substance. It's a substantial smell to it. If you were to drink it, you'd call it viscous, but when you smell it, it's like full-bodied smell. I love that. All right, so some of the things that you're getting here, they're common, typical bourbon-y notes. You got vanilla, you've got honey, orange, there's a little bit of spice because of the 18% rye, which makes some sense. I left this out actually a little bit. You saw I had the coin on top of it, but I left it out because leaving this out for just a little bit, and I would recommend you do this as well, opens it up a little bit. Not everything needs to sit out. In this case, I recommend it for this bourbon. There used to be a rule of thumb that you let something sit out for a minute for every year it's aged. That counts a little bit more for Scotch, at least in my opinion, but bourbon sometimes takes that on as well. Now there's a bit of a woodiness as well to the nose here. But really what you're getting a lot more of is like an orange zesty vanilla honey tone. So, all right, let's go ahead and take a sip. Cheers. Now that woodiness is one of the first things I notice. It comes across on your palate as like this drying, I often refer to it as a tannin. However, I actually learned that more from red wine, when you have that drying red wine kind of sensation. But in this case, it's very much coating the inside of your mouth, and your whole mouth is gonna kind of feel dry. It's an interesting feeling if you've never had that before. So there's peppery, also kind of honey notes, but mostly this is sitting pretty heavy. That's not keeping with the stuff I picked up in the nose, where those were some orange zest and honey and vanilla. This is heavier. This is woody. This is kind of like maple sugar a little bit. This is pepper, and yeah, that's mostly it. That being said, it's also got a little bit of sweetness to it, which I'm sure is obviously the corn here, because corn tends to taste very sweet in a bourbon. So overall, I really like this whiskey. I think this is a solid whiskey. I'll put the price down below here. I believe all 3 of these were relatively inexpensive. I know I bought all 3 of them for less than $100, I'm pretty sure. So I'll put the price up on the screen. Next, let's move on to the bottled in bond. Now, bottled in bond, you might remember, is a requirement, basically, that it has to adhere to certain standards. You're gonna get 100 proof whiskey whenever you do bottled in bond. The idea is that it's supposed to be a sign of quality. Now, nowadays, it's less needed, but way back when, when you could kind of do whatever you wanted to whiskey, calling something bottled in bond was a way for good distilleries to make their products stick out as, this is going to be a good quality product, you're not going to be drinking turpentine. So this is kind of an aged, antiquated concept, at least in my mind, but that being said, things that are bottled in bond are still 50% and higher ABV for me in a bourbon. Heck yeah. All right, let's go ahead and give this a nose. Now, once again, higher ABV. Be a little cautious if you're nosing along with me. Start a little further away because you don't want to burn your nose. Now, this has a very different smell to it than this, which is funny because it's only about 4% different. But either way, it does make a difference. You're picking up a little bit more of the char from the barrel here. So it's less that it's woody and more that it's got a very, very small hint of smoke in there. There's honey. There's kind of an herbaceousness to this as well. You're getting a little bit, I mean, some people would call it like vegetal, but that's fine. I mean, I've used that word myself, but to better describe that, think like, this is going to be kind of a bad description, but if you were to smell a fresh herb, like sage or tarragon or not mint, but maybe like oregano. It's not the smell that those particular herbs are giving and the taste that they impart. It's more that earthy kind of fresh, leafy green notes, that it gives you. You know what? You guys get on camera and try to describe a smell. I hope you're following me. All right, so there's a little bit of spice there too, followed up from the rye. It's kind of as if you were smelling something was pretty low rye count. Maybe like it's 18%, but I would say that this speaks a little higher than 18% personally. But either way, it's there. All right, let's go ahead and give this a taste. Cheers. So with the first one on the taste, there was a mapley sugar to it, right? That's coming across here too, but what it reminds me of more is where a lot of times when I say maple, I'm thinking maple syrup, right? Because it's a sweeter kind of mapley flavor. In this case, I'm thinking more like a maple tree because it's got this woodiness that goes right along with the maple. It's also got that drying, tannic kind of thing going on in your mouth. The mouthfeel here, this thing is going to keep going and going and going. In fact, I'm going to have a sip of water before I go to this one because I want to make sure I'm doing its due diligence. This sits pretty heavy in your mouth. There is, I guess you could call it like a coffee note to it, but it's more that like if you drank a black coffee, just the fact that it's a little bit bitter, I think that's more what I'm going for here. Okay, so overall, not as good as this, in my opinion. The higher ABV is nice, but flavor-wise, I think it's lacking a little bit. I think the ABV hides some of the goodness that you could be pulling out of there with the flavor. So let me just have a quick sip. All right, now this guy. This is the 1792 Full Proof. Now this got Whiskey of the Year from Jim Murray and for 2020. I don't know that I agree, but I mean he's a legend, right? He's a pillar in the community, if you will, and he's tried a lot more whiskeys in 2020 than I did. So maybe it was a lackluster year. This is really good. Don't misunderstand me. But it's more to think that this is the one that got his pick. I don't know that I agree with that. But either way. What I will tell you is it's got an interesting nose. It's kind of I'm gonna say this is like a baked cornbread almost. Interesting, actually. I did not have that in my notes, actually. I'm just picking that up right now. So baked cornbread along with cinnamon. There's kind of I want to say the first thing that comes to mind is nail polish remover, but not nearly that strong. More just that basic. That's an interesting. I want to try to explain that a little bit better. So if you were to smell nail polish, it's got that astringent kind of just poof, right? It's got a little bit of that, but if you also think about smelling nail polish, it's one scent, right? It's just, ow, yuck, gross, right? This has a little tiny bit of that in the nose, more muted. I don't know, that's an interesting one. I actually don't know that I picked that up before. That could be because I let it sit out for about a half hour or so. Maybe when it opens up, it gets that. That's interesting. I don't have that in my notes at all. All right, so moving along. We've got some spice in there as well. Once again, the rye spice coming through. There's a little bit of smoke, a little bit. That's about it. Wood, some oak. I don't know. Nose on that, not as impressive as, honestly, the small batch. Kind of surprising, actually. All right, let's go ahead and take a sip. Cheers. Okay. Well, the taste, I believe, I'm pretty sure I just made a lot of really weird faces. The taste on this is quintessential bourbon, but I'm gonna change my word. Not quintessential, all-encompassing bourbon. This has every bourbon note there is. So I'm gonna list these out for you. You got, starting off with honey and vanilla, or honey, vanilla, cinnamon, oak. You got, I think I said vanilla. Kind of like a cereal grain, almost like a cornflake kind of thing going on. Some molasses, a little bit. I'm gonna have another sip here. Some chocolate. A little bit of rye spice. I hope that the noises aren't grossing you out. I hope it's not picking up, but if it is, sorry. Maybe I'll try to turn them down in post. And a little bit of butteriness. It's interesting. The taste here, the taste of this does back up his claim of how good this is. It is super interesting. This is almost I wouldn't even say new. This is like an intermediate level person, like somebody who's trying to teach their palate. I'd say this is like intermediate, because this has everything. And if you can pick them all out in here, that's an accomplishment. This one took me a while to realize, because I kept doubting myself, actually. So I'd be like, oh, I taste rye. Yeah, that makes sense. There's some rye in here. I taste vanilla. I taste orange. I taste this. I taste that. And I'm like, there can't possibly be this much going on. But it is. The taste here is fantastic. It's very, very good. The nose was a letdown, but the taste more than backed it up. So let's talk overall with these three. Now, if I were to recommend you buy all three of these, and once again, I'll put the prices down here. If I didn't already, I'll put them again. The small batch, the bottled and bond, and the full proof. So my order would be to skip the bottled and bond completely. Just don't bother. It's not worth your money. So now that kind of puts it between the small batch and the full proof. Now here's where I'm having a tough time choosing. I guess I just have to try one more sip of both. All right, so let's go ahead and try the, I just had the full proof, so let's try the small batch again. Okay, you know, compared to the full proof, the taste on that, it's really good, but it's not as good. Okay, I'm almost thinking I don't need the extra sip, but I'm gonna take it anyway. All right. Yeah, the taste on that's really good. And for 125 proof, there's virtually no burn on this. So ignore the bottled and bond. I recommend buying the small batch, and I definitely recommend buying the full proof. This is worth it. You know, I don't agree that it should be whiskey of the year. I can't off the top of my head think of anything that's better, but that's not my job either. So whatever, I'll go with Jim Murray. I think this one's really good. The nose is a letdown, so don't even bother. I mean, nose it, of course, but don't be impressed by the nose, or you probably won't be impressed by the nose. Don't be deceived by it. The small batch has a great nose and less of a good taste. Considering between the two of these, you might spend like $70, I think. I hope I'm not wrong. I would have corrected myself several times here in on text. But I think you should buy both of these. These both get a buy it, this gets to ignore it. So, thank you for joining me here on the slightly longer version of the Whiskey Dictionary. And please check out the whiskydictionary.com. There's all kinds of good stuff there, including some new merch. I've got new rocks glasses, I've got Glencairns, I've got all the things. I've got the Whiskey Dictionary, which is just freaking awesome. I'm actually almost out of those, so if you haven't ordered one and you want one, now's the time. Anyway, so thank you very much for joining me here, and check out the description. There's all kinds of good stuff in there. Have a great rest of your night. Cheers.